Alrighty, thank you all for coming. I have just put into the chat, again, our link at the website. I try to do that every class. If I may have forgotten in the past a couple of times, but that is the link. I just put that in the chat. The link to the class in case you have missed any of the previous sessions or would like to review any of them, that's there on our website. You can also find it on YouTube. There is a playlist on YouTube. If you're having any trouble finding that, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone at the Kohelet will be able to help you out with finding that. So there we are. Here we are. We're ready to get started. In the past couple of weeks, we have started the process of researching Simcha, happiness. Okay, this is a primary concept that King Solomon is going to be focusing on in the book of Kohelet. It's going to actually kind of weave in and out because it's going to tie into a lot of different pieces. But the basic idea is that we said that the first half of the book of Kohelet is going to be discussing how we relate with this world. And the first thing that he wants to discover is how does happiness play? How do we deal with happiness? Is happiness a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it neither? Is it gray? Is it both? You know, we're going to have a number of takes that we're going to be going and taking with it. And what we saw last week, in the past couple of weeks, yeah, thank you for reminding me to the Blairs. Yeah, you asked me a couple weeks ago about whether there's a difference between happiness and bliss. I'm still researching it. I have yet to find something clearly definitive about that. Again, we talk about like the idea of nirvana or something like that, where it's just total bliss and, you know, what we're all, you know, paying in towards, so to speak. And that itself is, let me just take a second and address that from what I know just off the top of my head, is that when it comes to the idea of bliss or perfection, right? So we believe that the only perfect is God, right? He created everything. Everything that is here in front of us is a reflection of God's, how to put this the right way? There's no right way to put it. What we're doing is the problem is we are limited. We're trying to discuss something that's beyond human terms with human terms, and we're limited in that regard. But whatever it means, God, to some extent or another, limited this world and created a space for us to exist here in this world. Pure perfection is just him by himself alone. And that's the pure perfection. So, I mean, this is obviously a much broader concept than anything that we could discuss here. Right, I do understand that there is a concept of bliss in this world, but utter bliss would be something that's beyond this world and beyond our comprehension. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not giving you an answer right now. What I'm saying is that that's why I don't have an answer, because it's really something that I would have to do a lot more research into to give you a better sense. You know, you mentioned the chat. I'm addressing the chat that the Blairs have put up over here. When you talk about feeling a connection with Hashem, let's say, well, what is that? Is that actually God-given? God gives you that feeling, or is that something that's in ourselves? We feel connected. I don't know. You know, that's something that again requires a little more research. So we're just going to focus directly on happiness, and we're specifically focusing on this worldly happiness, this world happinessness. Okay, the concept of happiness in this world, coming from physical possessions. What we went through last week, was we discussed, King Solomon gave us a rundown of everything that he involved himself in order to try to achieve happiness. So he had everything, right? Anything you could think of. He even had a catch-all term. He said tanugot b'nei adam, right? The joys of mankind. So whatever you could think of, King Solomon is saying that he tried it, right? He attempted to reach happiness in all these ways, and he hasn't yet given us a definitive answer about what that was. What was the result? He just told us what he did so far. That's what we're going to pick up this week, is we're going to begin to see what his reaction was to all that indulgence that he took. That's a loaded term, obviously, indulgences, but yeah, he definitely indulged in some degree. And what was it? What did he come out with at the end of that? Okay, so without any further ado, I'm going to jump into the screen share. Let me see. Sorry, I seem to be having an issue here for a second. Okay. Please let me know. I'm not sure. Can everyone see the text here? Can I get a thumbs up from somebody? Yeah.
It's perfect.
Okay, great.
Yes, it looks good. Looks
okay,
good.
I was trying this on a different computer, so I wasn't sure if I hit the right button. So, okay. All right. So thank you. We are now here on verse number 10, or chapter 2, number 10, or Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud. Okay. The last thing that, again, King Solomon said was that he did everything he could. He did way beyond, he brought more things to Jerusalem, the city of scholars, than anybody had ever brought before him. So now he's going to start to take piece by piece what exactly it was that he found. All right, so we're going to discuss the verse first, and we say over here like this: V'chol asher sha'alu einai, everything that my eyes asked for, lo atzalti mehem, I did not withhold from them. Now, that word itself, we're going to have to discuss briefly what that is, but to simply put, I did not refuse my eyes everything that they asked. Okay, v'lo manati et libi mikol simcha, and I did not withhold from my heart. This is really where withhold comes from. Manati means to hold back. So I did not hold back from my heart all happiness. Ki libi sameach b'chol amali, and my heart was happy, was gladdened by all the hard work. V'zeh haya chelki mikol amali, and this is what I was left with. This is my portion from all my hard work. Okay, so let me read that again, kind of bouncing back and forth between different ideas. But he says, "V'chol asher shalu einai," again, anything that my eyes asked for, lo atzalti mehem, I did not keep away from them. Lo manati et libi mikol simcha, I did not hold back my heart from all happiness. Ki libi sameach mikol amali, because and it came about that my heart was happy from all my work. V'zeh haya chelki mikol amali, and this was my portion from all my hard work. Okay. So over here, what we have is an interesting shift in the usage of the words of King Solomon. Again, we mentioned in the past, we are avoiding giving you a direct the translation, the Hebrew English translation, because we're trying to get to the literal understanding of the words. The deeper understanding of the words actually is what I'm looking for. There's something deeper behind the words here in the Hebrew words. And so until now, we've understood that the eyes are representative of a surface level understanding of something, and the heart is representative of a deeper investigative understanding of something. That's what we've been working with so far. Now, that doesn't really fit so much with this verse over here. I kind of mulled around my brain a couple times to see if we would be able to tie that in here, and it doesn't seem to tie in perfectly, but I think the spirit is the same. That's something common in the Hebrew language, that you might have words that don't translate directly the same way in every time, but there's the spirit behind them. So the spirit over here would be that when we talk about things that your eyes desire, okay, that means, so again, eyes, we're talking about things on the surface level. So that means that anything that my eyes desired, meaning anything that is objectively joy-bringing, okay? It's something that everybody's eyes would desire, okay? It's something that everyone would appreciate. So those things, lo atzalti mehem, I did not separate from those things, okay? I did not hold myself back from those things, okay? Again, that means some things that are objectively joy-bringing, okay? We could talk about, delicious food, typically, chocolate ice cream. That is typically something that is objectively brings joy. Okay, obviously there's restrictions to that also. Then we have the idea of something that your heart desires. And my understanding over here is that something that your heart desires, something that there's depth to your desire for it, something that not necessarily would other people appreciate, but you appreciate, something that you like and you enjoy. Something that is it requires you to be vulnerable to access, for example. You need to be able to be honest with yourself that it's something that you enjoy. Okay. So when it comes to that, he uses a different term. He says, lo manati et libi. I did not hold my heart back. Okay. I let my heart free. I let it be vulnerable and run free to access all these parts, all these types of happiness. So when it comes to things that are objectively happy, joy bringing, so things that objectively bring people happiness, that I did not separate from. Okay, again, this word atzalti we're going to discuss in a second. Then we also have things which I myself enjoy. Not everyone necessarily appreciate it but because of who I am, how I was raised, the deeper parts of my mind, those things also I did not hold myself back. That requires me to hold back from them. Okay. The word atzalti is itself a very difficult word to translate. The commentaries here try to, but I haven't seen something that's quite satisfying yet. The shoresh, this aleph tzadi lamed, atzal. Well, we actually use that as a what's the term? Preposition. Preposition? I think so. Yeah. So it usually means eitzel. When something is eitzel something, it means it's next to it. Okay. So there's an idea of conjoining things with this atzal. It means to connect with things, or really to share with things. So another place in the Tanakh, in the 24 books of the Tanakh, that we have this term atzal coming up is where when Moses complains to God that he's a one-man band and he's unable to lead the Jewish people all by himself. This happens in Parshat Bahalotcha near the beginning of the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar. And over there, it says that God tells him to go and gather 70 wise men from the elders of Israel. And what he's going to do is he's going to provide Moses with a prophecy, and it's going to spill over to everybody else. Okay. And that's where it says that they will atzal, they will get a little bit of his prophecy also, and they'll all become prophets and be able to join him in the act of leading the Jewish people. And the rabbis there point out it was very much like a candle. If you have one candle that has a fire on it, you're able to light another candle. And you know what happens? The first candle doesn't lose out anything. It doesn't lose any of its power. So in the same way, Moses has remained the same prophet that he always was, didn't lose out any of his power of prophecy, but he was able to share it with everybody else. So it's kind of this idea of sharing, of conjoining things. So when he talks about the things that everybody enjoys, he says, I did not share myself from them, which is a strange concept. It almost sounds like what he's saying is that I didn't I'm trying to put into words what it is exactly it was. He didn't require anybody else. He didn't hold himself back, but it's more than that. It's more he didn't share it with anybody. It's a strange concept that he's saying, that everything that my eyes desired, I did not. Again, it's a hard word to translate, and really I think I need to put a little more work into figuring out what exactly it is that King Solomon is trying to express with this word. We have the word show up in another case when they talk about, again, my knowledge of Kabbalah is very limited, but one of the things I do understand is that we talk about actually tying into what we mentioned earlier, that there's this idea of Hashem in his perfection, with nothing else around, no borders, it's just pure godliness. And they refer to that as atzilut, right? So oneness, but that would be a very different concept. So I will admit that there's more work to be done to figure out exactly what this atzal, exactly that shoresh is trying to tell us. But again, we have this idea that he's telling us that he engaged in all forms of happiness, not just the things that you and I would enjoy, but things that only he would enjoy. Okay. And he tells us that he did achieve some level of happiness. He says, Libi sameach, my heart was gladdened, mikol amali, from all my hard work. But that's where you then find these next 5 words. V'zeh haya chelki mikol amali. And this was my portion from all that I put into, all of the work that I put in. And the word this, zeh, is a limiting word. What it's saying is that after all was said and done, he had all these things that he was accessing through his happiness. He walked away with a very small portion of the happiness he was expecting. So he says, my heart was gladdened from all my hard work, but it was a little bit. It wasn't anything that I was, it wasn't mind-blowing. It wasn't, it wasn't everything. It was quite literally a limited small thing. It was my portion from all my work. This was my portion from all my work. And the rabbis actually point this out in the Talmud and the Midrash. They mention that this line, Zehaya Chelki Mikol Amali, we mentioned actually way back when in the beginning of the book, we talked about this famous story, well-known story that King Solomon was dethroned for a period of time by either a demon or angel or whatever it was, some sort of wicked force, as we understand it, dethroned him for a period of time, and he had to travel many, many miles back to Jerusalem, and then to convince all the sages that he was the real Solomon, and the one on the throne was a fraud. Okay, again, this is a midrash. Whether it's literally to be understood literally or figuratively, that's a deeper discussion. But whatever it is, there was a period of time where he was not fully king, and he was just a regular fellow. And the rabbis learn from this verse over here, Zehaya Chelki Mikol Amali. They say, what was his portion from all his hard work? Well, one rabbi says that it was referring to his staff. He still was although he was not king of Israel, he still controlled his own staff. And the other opinion says it was either his cloak or his canteen. There's different versions of the story, but whatever it is, he still held control over something, right? So again, this story it may be an allegory. It's definitely way beyond the simple understanding of the words. But you see that the rabbis are pointing out that when you say this is my portion, you're saying that there's something very small. He walked away with something very small. All the happiness that he endowed himself with, as we mentioned in the past weeks, like pouring it over his head, he walked away with a very small portion. And so that leads him to his first reaction to it. And that's going to be our next verse. Okay? I'm going to give about 10 seconds if anybody wants to chime in before we move on. Otherwise, we'll go directly into the next verse. Okay. All right. So verse 11 over here, let me just scroll it up a little bit. So it's in the center of the page. Okay. Ufaniti ani. I turned myself away. B'chol ma'asai sha'asu yadai. From all the actions that my hands did. Uve elmol. And from all the hard work. She'almalti la'asod, that I worked hard to do. Okay. So now I'm taking some time back. I'm stepping back. And I'm looking at everything that I did. V'hinei, and behold. Right, this is his first reaction to everything. He gives us 3 descriptions. Hakol hevel. Number 1 is everything's hevel. Right, that's our word that we keep on finding. It's this. It's definitely something. It's not nothing, but it's as close to nothing as you're going to get. It's very hard to grasp. Uru'ut ruach. It's spirit breaking. Vein yitron tachat hashamesh, and there's no purpose for it. It doesn't add anything to everything under the sun. Okay. Once again, let me read this all at once. Ufaniti ani b'chol ma'asai. I cleared myself away from all the actions, she'asud yadai, that my hands did, uve'amal she'amalti la'asot, and all the hard work that I worked hard to do. V'hinei, and behold, hakol hevel, everything was hevel. U'ut ruach, it was spirit breaking. Vein yitron tachat hashamesh, and it had no addition, it added nothing to the world under the sun. That's his first reaction. Okay, there's a number of points I want to point out over here. Is this word faniti? Okay, lefanot literally means to turn away, but it also means to clear away. Okay, my understanding of this is that King Solomon is telling us, I cleared my mind. So we would call that in English, he meditated. He meditated on everything that he did. Okay, all this hard work that led to a very specific and minute amount of happiness. He cleared his mind from everything, and he focused on it. All the hard work that he did, all the work of his hands that he put into it, right? So there was physical work that he put into acquiring his happiness. And he walks away with 3 descriptors, right? This is the first time we've seen all 3 of these in tandem, okay? You've got Hevel, right? Again, as we said before, it's something, but it's very hard to grasp. It's like steam, right? You can distill it, but it's very hard to do it's very hard to do that. He says it's ruach ruach, it's spirit breaking. And there's no purpose to it. Adds nothing to the world under the sun. Okay? So that's, again, his initial reaction before anything else is, he says it's all worthless. Now, I'm going to give you a sneak preview over here. You'll notice the next verse here in verse 12 starts with the same word again. So he's going to do a double take. Okay? So his first reaction, again, this is only his initial reaction to everything, all the happiness that he tried to achieve and all the work that he put into everything. His initial reaction is, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, right? Not only is it worthless, not only is it impossible to achieve, it's also spirit breaking, okay? And so if you were King Solomon, you put in all this work, right? And you tried everything, like everything, to gain some level of happiness out of this world, right? And you had access to everything. If you wanted philosophical engagement, you had plenty of smart people to talk to. You were in the city of scholars. If you were interested in, all the goods and gold and silver and diamonds, you went through everything. And all you walked away with was really a minute level of happiness. So then your reaction would probably be very similar. It's like, I did all that. And what did I get from it? I really got nothing. I got very little out of everything that I worked hard to do. So that kind of shows us, he's going to say, hold on a second. So I put in a lot of work and I got very little. It's very much like steam. It matches this idea of steam that we've been talking about, matches it perfectly. I'm trying to distill steam. And what did I walk away with? A little condensation, not much more than that. He says, it broke my spirit, right? He went through all this work to get to nothing. It breaks his spirit. And he says, then the logical reaction or the logical outcome of that would be, then there must be no purpose to this whole thing. There must be no purpose to this happiness thing or pleasure out of the physical world. I'm just going to take a look at the chat. Is I'm having midlife crisis? That's a very good question. Yeah, I don't know. He's probably having some sort of equivalent of that. I don't know exactly if you would call it that. Remember, he's on a path towards, he's researching, to actually state it as something as relatable as a midlife crisis, it might be helpful, but I don't know if that's exactly what it is. It probably has some of the underpinnings of a midlife crisis in the same way. So somebody goes through and they put in 20 years of work. By the time they're 40 or so, I'm not talking from experience. So I'm just knowing what I've seen from, pop culture and things like that, is somebody puts in a lot of work and gets to a certain point in their career and they say, wait, where am I going from here? I assume King Solomon's going through at least a similar process. I'm not ready to just jump in and say he's going through, a midlife crisis, but it probably has a similar context to it, that he's trying to reach more than he has, and he's finding himself stuck. So he has to do some research and move beyond that. So again, before we move on, right, to recap over here, he's saying, after all that work and all the stuff I did, I got a very little amount of happiness out of it. In which case, I have three logical, what he's perceiving at this point as logical outcomes, results, is that it was like trying to capture steam. It broke my spirit, and therefore it has no purpose. Now the problem is, that with such a damning verdict, you're actually already reaching into the illogical. I'm sorry, he's actually already reaching into the illogical over here. Because to say that something has no purpose under the sun, well, that's a very strange thing to do, as he's going to point out now in the next verse, because that goes against the fundamental of belief in God and belief in the creator of this world. If you believe that something has no purpose under the sun, then you're going to have an issue with why did God create it? That's what he's going to do now in verse number 12. Okay, Pasuk Yud Bet. All right. So again, he starts off with the same word over here that he did the last verse. So he meditated, he came out with an outcome, and now he's going to meditate again and say, this doesn't make sense. Ufaniti ani, again, I have meditated on this. Lirot chachma, to see wisdom, viholelut, and frivolity, visichlut, and foolishness. Okay, that's how we've translated it so far in the book. So now I'm looking at this again, and I say, I have to look at wisdom, frivolity, and foolishness. Ki meha adam, who is a person, sheyavo acharei hamelech, to come after the king, to follow the king, et asher kvar asuhu, with that which was already created or made. Now, the sentence structure is very difficult over here. It does not translate properly into English because, again, you're dealing with a poetic version of the Hebrew language. So it's very hard to kind of translate word for word. I'll go through it again and you'll see what I mean. Again, ufaniti ani, once again, I am meditating on this again. Lirot chachma, to see wisdom, v'holelot, and frivolity, v'sichlut, and foolishness. Kimeha adam, what is man, sheyavo achrei hamelech, to come after the king, es asher kivar asuhu, over that which was already created. Okay. Now again, it's jarring for us to hear in English like that. But the gist is, he's saying, I'm going to have to re-see this again, because I'm saying that all this stuff is purposeless. But who am I to come after the king? In this case, the king being Hashem. It's actually the first time that I recall from the book, if I'm pretty sure about that, first time in this book that he's actually referencing God directly. But he's saying, who am I to come after God, after the king, all that he's made, and say that something has no purpose? Now that is, as we say, illogical. Okay, so he's saying in the last verse, I came to a logical conclusion that happiness is nothing, it's worthless. But then I have to rethink that. Again, I meditate over this again, and I see that who am I to say that something that God made is worthless, is worth nothing? Okay, now he tells us that. How does he do that? He takes a second and he resets his context, his mental framework over here. Okay, says I'm going to have to rethink the ideas that I've been running with so far, being wisdom, again, chachma, wisdom, holelot, which is this frivolity, and sichlut, which is foolishness. Okay, and we've differentiated so far, again, between frivolity and foolishness, or frivolity and happiness. Those are different ideas. We mentioned this holelot really means kind of going crazy, just going all out and not being totally unbarred and limitless with your reaction and happiness over things. And that's actually, we mentioned in the past that there's a place for that in service of God also. Like, for example, we talk about Hallel. I mentioned this in the past weeks. Hallel is a praise of God that we say when we kind of leave our functions, our facilities, and we just jump with joy at God's salvation, for example. So the same idea over here is he's talking about frivolity. So again, and we've mentioned this before, is where he's going to, a key theme over here is he's trying to give us a sense of things that you and I or society has determined to be foolish. Well, those things might not necessarily be foolish. They might not necessarily be worthless. And so in that case, he's looking again and saying, all right, well, if I'm coming out and I'm saying that there's no purpose to this under the sun, but I know logically that that can't be because God created it, then maybe I have to start reimagining where I see wisdom, frivolity, silliness, or foolishness? Where am I drawing the lines between those things? Okay, so foolishness, again, something that the society declares foolish. Well, maybe I'm not seeing the right thing over there. Maybe my sense of wisdom is off. Maybe my meter is off for a little bit over here. And that's leading me to come to this foolish conclusion, okay? That something that God created would be worthless, okay? In the same sense, also over here, King Solomon's telling us that this happiness. So I'm trying to figure out how it fits into wisdom. Maybe I should try to figure out where it fits into foolishness or frivolity. Maybe it does belong to wisdom. So we kind of have like these three headers of thought. Okay, we have wise thought, frivolous thought, foolish thought. So which category does it fit into? Okay, and for me to go and where I am right now, I think I'm misunderstanding where it is. That is a good point. Again, the Blairs are pointing out that not necessarily does everything fall into those three categories. There may be more categories. I would agree. I think just for the purpose of what we're talking about, he's talking about something that's, society declares it to be one way. Okay, so again, let's take a fully material society. So a fully material society would declare that, cash is king. It's all about making the money. It's all about getting the goods and, retiring young and, moving to your vacation home for the rest of your life. That would be, I'm not, there's no judgment in that, by the way. I'm not judging that lifestyle. I'm only saying that would be a materialistic view. So in that society, they would look at, for example, asceticism as perhaps foolishness. And the opposite would be in a fully theocratic society where everything, let's say everything is God in the world to come, and there's no place for this world. Well, then spending your money on fun things would be foolishness in that society, or it would be frivolous. That's the other option. Maybe somebody just appears like a crazy person to everybody, not just a foolish person, but absolutely crazy. So in that regard, I think he's giving us kind of the different states that you would look at, specifically our question, right? Our question of material possessions. How do they bring you happiness? Do they bring you happiness? In what degree? So he's saying until now, it's all useless, right? If I'm hating it so much, if I'm breaking my back to get it to get just a little bit out of it, so my reaction is going to be, why does anyone bother doing this? Right? The whole thing seems to be a waste of time. And if it's all a waste of time, then it's all worthless and it has no place under the sun. But the problem with that is, again, that the one who made everything under the sun is perfect. And who is man to come and question something that the king put into place? Okay. So it's not a logical argument to say, I have determined that this is totally worthless. There is a purpose to it. There has to be a purpose to it and a use for it if it's here in this world. If the king, again, put it here in this world for us to do something with, not necessarily to enjoy, not necessarily to shun, right? I have to go and reimagine now wisdom, frivolity, silliness, or foolishness, okay? That's kind of how I'm understanding what he's saying over here. And this requires, again, another meditation, right? So whereas his first meditation, and you can imagine the meditation of King Solomon is pretty good to start out with, right? The wisest of all mankind. But he says, you know what? I even realized myself, I have to rethink this because something is wrong with my judgment over here, because I'm coming out with it being worthless. And in reality, there must be some worth and some purpose to everything because the king put it here. Okay. And so in discussing what it is that, why the king put it here, why God put it here in this world, and really part of it is what is drawing us towards this. We are drawn towards material possessions. There's no doubt about that, right? We all look at King Solomon's, menu of joyous things, and we're like, I'll try it, King Solomon. Don't worry, I got it. I'd give it a shot. Right? That's the famous line from Tevye that you make rich people and poor people. I wouldn't mind trying the struggles of the rich person for a day. So we all think like, hey, King Solomon, I'll take care of this for you. I'll figure out a better answer than you can. No, we're talking about the wisest of all people, and his initial reaction again was that there's no purpose and it was more work than it was worth. And in that case, the problem is if he determines that it's worthless, how does that make sense with the fact that the king put it here in this world? Why are we drawn to it so much? And with that, he's going to move to verse number 13. Okay, this is a little shorter of a verse. Just bring it up to the center of the page. And he says, V'ra'iti ani, and I see, sheyesh yitron lachachma min hasichlut. There is something better about wisdom than foolishness. Ki yitron ha'or min hachoshech. The same way that there's something better than light than darkness. Okay? So again, V'ra'iti ani, I have seen, sheyesh yitron lachachma min hasichlut, that there is an advantage to wisdom over foolishness, like there's an advantage to light over darkness. And one of the commentaries over here, the Mitzudah, he points out over here a very interesting idea. When do you notice that it's light outside? Or when do you notice light? When it's against a dark background. When you see the contrast between light and dark, that's when you see light properly, right? You see that with you see it everywhere. And the reality is, but we find a Torah example of that. It talks about the idea of tzarat, which has unfortunately been mistranslated as leprosy. It's not exactly leprosy; it's some sort of spiritual skin affliction that affected people at a certain time in history. No longer affects us. But there was a spiritual skin affliction that the person would get a white splotch on their skin somewhere. And in order for the Kohen, for the priest, to declare the person impure and to have to go through the process of purification, the Kohen has to see the difference between the color of the person's skin and the white splotch. So the rabbis teach us that, let's say a person's an albino or overly white. They mention a German, which the Germans of the times of the Talmud would be probably the Gallic tribesmen. But whatever it is, they say somebody who's that white, that pale, would not be able to become impure or contaminated with tzarat. The Kohen is going to be unable to see the difference between the white shades of white and their skin. They need to see the contrast. They need to see light versus the darker of the skin. And traditionally, the rabbis teach us this is not to say any sort of it's not a racial thing. Just happens to be historically the Jews of most of time were not very light, not very dark. They were kind of middle shade skin. So it was very easy for the Kohen to be able to tell the tzarat on their skin. Again, that's just historically that's how it used to be. Now we have all sorts of shades and colors, and everyone's beloved and accepted in our clan. But what we have over here is this idea that King Solomon is teaching us that light and darkness. So you may ask yourself, in the same way that he's asking all these questions, what's the point? What's the point of darkness? Right? Darkness is just sad. You can't see anything. Why would God put darkness in this world? And the simplest answer I'll tell you is darkness is here so you can see light and appreciate light. Right? After Shabbat is over, we light a candle and we make a blessing on the light, because the fire, we get to appreciate fire after having not been able to use it for 24 hours, and we get to appreciate it. So we make a blessing on it. It's the contrast that lets you enjoy something, the good thing, even more. And the same way, foolishness, you may ask yourself, why is foolishness here? And the same way, I'll answer you, maybe foolishness is here sometimes so you can recognize wisdom. All right. If you have, so we live in a world now of misinformation, right? That's the big hot topic nowadays, right? If something's information or misinformation. Well, it helps when you see them in contrast with each other, information and misinformation, right? And you're able to see, okay, what's right and what's wrong. You stand by the by the counter at Fred Meyer, and you see the National Enquirer and the what do you call it? The National Geographic, right? National Enquirer, National Geographic, right? So you look at one and you say, you know what? I think I know where the truth is lying over here and where the falsehood is. And that helps me determine where wisdom is and where wisdom ends and where foolishness begins. So the same way that light does that, the same way wisdom does that. How does that tie into our discussion? In the same way, I would say, King Solomon's saying it would seem to be that perhaps there's something here that God wants us to see by having happiness that's so saturated, it's like saccharine sweet, to the point where it's actually not enjoyable anymore. He's saying, I broke my back trying to gain happiness and didn't find it. So perhaps, I'm not going to say it's worthless. He's reeling that back over here. He's not saying, I don't think it is worthless, but I think it may be here partially in order to give us a contrast. And we're going to discuss that more in the coming weeks about what exactly that contrast looks like. But it's there to show us that, okay, this happiness that I tried so hard to get was not actually happiness. It was not enjoyable. But you know what that tells us? That there is a happiness that is enjoyable and purposeful. Okay? If this version is not good, in the same way that darkness shows us that there's light and foolishness shows us that there's wisdom, so disgusting happiness, totally over the top happiness shows us that there's purposeful happiness, that there's a light version, there's a wise version of the same thing. Okay, so that's it's showing us that there's something here that's actually going to be actually enjoyable for us to achieve, and something that we're actually going to be able to get out of it. By the way, we're talking about physical, material happiness. He's not talking about spiritual happiness at this point. He's specifically focusing on the physical. So that means that he's telling us that there's something out of the physical world that you'll be able to get happiness from, not just a spiritual pursuit. What that is, how that's going to show up, we're going to have to see in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. We're at time. If anybody wants to stay on and ask any questions, please feel free. Otherwise, I'm just going to end the share right now. Okay. Thank you all for joining us.